You're listening to Don't Waste Water.
The mothership previously has raised money quite effectively. Hopefully we're following on that step as well. And I think that level of raise demonstrates confidence from the investors that we can also make an impact on the industry, just like Gradiant is on the journey to do that.
Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast.
It's pretty much the brain power. So I think at least 80% of the costs of goods sold, if you can say that in digital space, is the labor side. So we need to recruit data scientists, water treatment engineers, customer success sort of people, commissioning, DevOps type of people to operate the virtual system. So it's predominantly that. And the category of this type of personnel can be quite expensive. We can be competing with the likes of Google and Microsoft to get the best talent. So you can imagine how costly that can be.
How much more do you have to pay those people compared to the average water people?
So I would imagine something like 50% or more. And it ranges from different regions.
It's an interesting career advice to give to people that right now, even if you want to do a purpose stuff like working in water, a sound understanding of AI and software can pay dividends. I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Hipley as my guest. Do you have like a little bit of a pocket for dry powder in case there's really a cool company out there which you have to snap?
Yeah, in the industry, you have to be opportunistic. So you never know. I can say you never know.
Hip is the CEO of Turing.
I think it's the perception of AI. Some customers don't know what value they want to gain out of it. So the business outcome, even though it's easy to say you can save energy, chemicals, what does that mean? How do they do it? So I think the awareness of what it can do and how much data is required to achieve it. There's also a cost of cybersecurity. Where's the data going? Is it protected?
Turing automates impact with a line of digital solutions for the entire life cycle of water.
We're at $1 million at the moment annually.
So 1 million of ARR.
Yeah, and we're looking to scale, in that 5 to 7 years to following the footsteps of Gradiant, the unicorns status.
And before we start, let me thank our sponsor, Simple Lab. Kids grow so fast, right? One day they're toddling around in your living room and somewhat the next they raise a Series A. Okay, I know, weird analogy, a spin-off company is not really a kid, but I'm still sure it made Prakash Govindan and Anurag Bajpayee something to see Gradiant spin-off Turing raise its $14 million Series A today. As we'll discuss with Hip in a minute, Turing's spin-off dates back to 2023, which aligns with the hype wave the move has experienced, especially in the US, where an average of 33 spin-offs per year have been made from 2021 to 2023. And long before that, we've seen spin-offs create ravingly successful companies like Agilent Technologies, spun off of HP, or even more famously, PayPal, spun from eBay. But probably closer to us, we have spectacular examples of successful spin-offs in water tech as well. Ever heard of Xylem or Veralto? They're respective spin-offs of ITT and Danaher. Now, as a growth stage company like Gradiant, spinning off an arm and placing some of their M&A takes in that boat can be more surprising. Yet for them, it's a strategy they even repeated in between with the spin-out of Alkali last year. The idea is to provide shareholder value with more specialized investment vehicles, also offer different capitalization alleys for further rounds, and maybe do a bit of fully legal tax optimization. But probably more decisively, you now have a new vehicle that can focus its management and agility on the new core, for Turing AI, for Alkali the battery value chain, while, as we'll discuss with Hip later, also aligning pay scales to the focus, not to the original industry. Turing is not starting from scratch. They leveraged the past independent 18 months and their 2-year incubation before that to rack up some impressive achievements, as you'll hear shortly. But with today's Series A, a new growth cycle starts for them. 14 million is above average for a Series A by 50%, but maybe more decisively in their specific digital solutions lane, a 14 million raise is 3.5 times above average. So what's needed for Turing? Let's discuss with Heap. Right after I remind you that if you like what you hear, please take this episode and share it with a colleague, a friend, your boss or your team. make sure to subscribe, and I'll meet you on the other side. Hi, Hip. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Anton. Thanks for having me.
We very shortly touched on the story of Turing when I had Prakash Govindan on that microphone. But before we go to the story, what is real-time operational excellence?
So in a nutshell, if I reflect the status quo of industrial automation at the moment, a lot of operators are waiting for alarms to happen, looking at trends to see what's going on in the plant. What we're saying with real-time intelligence is to be ahead of that game, be proactive, and work out any things that go wrong with the plant, any optimization opportunities. We provide that insight to the operators and the technicians to address, delivering them the operating intelligence, the actionable insights for them to take action to prolong or improve their asset life and OPEX, etc.
In your press release, you say that that need is greater as it has ever been. So what is the status quo today? Is the important part real time so that nothing is real time today? Or is it excellence so that nothing is really excellent today?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
The quality of the labor force. One of the things we identify that, a lot of the silver generation, the very experienced people with grey hairs are retiring, and the younger generation comes in and they don't have the same practical experience with, a good level of judgment for what could go wrong. So that's what we want to solve. The problem we want to solve is that level of knowledge these days, and how do we manage knowledge for the long term, for the water industry.
And how do you do that in a unique fashion at Turing?
I've got 28 years of experience in designing, commissioning, constructing, and operation maintaining water treatment plants. So what I'm doing is actually working myself out of jobs, downloading my experience, combining that with software and AI or other rule-based algorithms to use that knowledge for those algorithms to do the work that I would do as an engineer, but do it, 100 times faster.
So we'll get to how you do that, but let's catch everybody up on Turing's story. To me, if I try to reconstruct that Turing story, it starts with the acquisition of Sinota by Gradiant in 2022. It's not officially Turing at the time. Turing doesn't exist yet, but you're already into that picture because at the time you're the CTO of Gradiant, right? So what's the story of that acquisition of Sinota, and how do you integrate them together with what you have at the time in terms of digital capabilities at Gradiant?
It actually started in 2021.
Okay, so even before.
When I founded SmartOps as a sort of product category that we wanted to grow Gradiant's sort of future operation and maintenance business, take it to the next level of what's available in industrial automation. So that at that time, we started with how do we make SCADA systems better? The next level was infusing it with AI, an AI-powered SCADA system. So that's when we considered, do we do it in-house or do we acquire a startup that can help speed up the velocity of development? That's when Sinota came in the picture and got acquired mid-22. And then we recognized, okay, we've got the water treatment covered. What is the whole entire water value chain, which the missing bit we're missing is really networks, water and wastewater networks. So that's when we acquired Space Age Lab, another startup, but this time in Singapore. So that we brought that into the group.
That's 1 year later, right? That's 2023.
Yes. So together, that's what spun out as Turing from Gradiant.
So now I have to apologize because
Sure.
I'm stupid, but I need explanation. You have these two startups plus your SmartOps product line from Gradiant. So the three of you together are put in a separate entity called Turing. And that's where I need to understand how it exactly works, because it's a wholly owned independent subsidiary. And to me, some of these words are antinomic one to another. Whether you are independent or you are wholly owned, whether you are independent or you are a subsidiary, but how are you a wholly owned independent subsidiary?
We are independent, and Gradiant is a minority shareholder in Turing. That's how we want to clarify as simple as possible. So we operate independently from Gradiant, and Gradiant is a minority shareholder.
And it is like that since the beginning,
Yeah.
but really from the beginning, Gradiant was a minority shareholder.
After the spin out, during the acquisition, it was all a major shareholder is Gradiant. So Sinota, Space Age Lab were subsidiaries of Gradiant at that time until the spin out.
Okay, now the last piece in that puzzle is that 6 months ago, roughly, Mike Dixon, the founder of Sinota, steps down as the managing director of that entity and becomes a consultant for Turing. And you jump ship from the role of CTO of Gradiant to the role of CEO of Turing. What's the story?
It's a interesting story, actually. I've always been passionate about force water treatment engineering side. And so the next step for my, growth, personally, professionally, is to learn something completely different. So software and AI was sort of the natural path as sort of Gradient and the industry as a whole is going towards digital transformation, business intelligence. So in a way, it was sort of a natural progression for me to take outside of my comfort zone. That's what I've liked doing my whole career. So that's when the transition happened. In terms of, Mike, its role, there's always been a role for him, but I think he had passion to do something else, and growing Sinota stage where he did was sort of he accomplished something. So he wanted to do something different, basically.
If I'm right, this CEO role for you is the first time you have a non-technical position. I mean, I guess CEO of an AI company is still technical. I give you that. But it's the first time that, officially speaking, you don't have a purely technical position.
Yeah, I have been an operations manager, but you're right. There's a lot of element of technical involvement in there. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to quickly thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. If you're in the water industry and you're running a water quality sampling campaign or tweaking plant process performance, Simple Lab has you covered. You can easily order online from over 275 commercial labs. Simply put, Simple Lab is a one-stop shop for everything from routine testing kits to specialized analyses like PFAS or microplastics. You don't have to juggle multiple labs and complicated logistics anymore. Instead, you get a single, streamlined process for ordering kits and reviewing results. Plus, there's always a real person to talk to, so if you're tired of cobbling together lab documents and quotes and services for each new requirement, or you just want to try a new way for more efficient testing of water samples, check out Simple Lab. They're all about making water quality testing, well, simple. So head to their website, the link is in the description, line up the tests you need, hit order, and let them handle the rest. Thanks Simple Lab for supporting my work. Check them out to support me, and back to me. This brings us to today, where you're announcing a $14 million Series A round led by Sapphire Partners. Before we go into what you will use the money for, can I acknowledge that 14 million in digital is a lot? I mean, I did a study of the different rounds in the water sector over the past 7 years, and the average in digital endeavors is around 3 million. So at 14 million, it's a huge round for the field you're in. And at the same time, you're a spin-off of Gradient, who's raising rounds like 225 million in the last one. So 14 million is not so much. So how do you position yourself? It's like, oh, it's a big raise, or we are still a dwarf compared to our mother company.
There's apples and oranges there, the type of business we play. The mothership previously has raised money quite effectively. Hopefully we're following on that step as well. And I think that level of raise demonstrates confidence from the investors that we can also make an impact on the industry, just like Gradient is on the journey to do that.
And how do you ambition to have that impact through that 14 million raise? What will you be using the money for?
One thing we know is expansion globally. So North America, Europe, and Middle East. We're very strong in Asia currently. So the geographic reach is important, and that covers where Gradient has been as well. Gradient's customer also become our customers in the industrial water space. Secondly is developing more of the AI. So as we bring the companies together, we can create that platform where it's quite end-to-end. So from treatment side to water distribution to sewer monitoring, and then to sewage treatment, recycling, and then recycle water back. So cover the whole life cycle of the water, which is exciting. I grew up in Australia and water scarcity is a big issue. So being able to have some intelligence in the whole sort of water cycle is important. It delivers probably maximum intelligence.
When you say expansion geographically to Europe, Middle East, North America, does that mean opening offices, hiring people, and do some stuff in those regions, or do it the Gradiant / Turing style and acquire a couple of startups in those geographies and then do that external growth?
I think it'll be more focus on organic growth because we're in the digital space. We don't need to open physical offices and we can work internationally, virtually. So that keeps the costs low and it seems to be effective for the digital sort of space. One thing we do well is also the on-premise deployment. So that requires personnel on the ground, commissioning the workstation, the servers to do the AI on site, because it's a requirement of cybersecurity for certain customers.
Despite being an AI-first company and digital company, there are some stuff which still require to go on site, mostly because industrial players will simply not let you in from remote. You will have to be inside to plug a computer or to do anything. In your press release, you say that you'll use that money to scale your AI-powered platforms. And bear with me for that analogy because it's a long and a bit of a stretch. But I discussed aquamembrane Series B on that microphone some months ago. And aquamembranes, at the heart of it, their essence is that they are optimizing desalination and membranes. You are also optimizing desalination and membranes. They do it with a physical product. You do it with a software solution and an AI solution. So when they say they are raising some millions to enhance their capacity, I clearly see that it's going to be to invest in the workshop, in fabrication stuff, in equipment, in building inventory and stuff. When you say you're scaling your AI-powered platforms, it's a bit more difficult to grab what that means. Will you proactively acquire data centers or increase your computing capabilities, or is it really about the brain power and those people which you send out for commissioning?
It's pretty much the brain power. So I think at least 80% of the costs of goods sold, if you can say that in digital space, is the labor side. So we need to recruit data scientists, water treatment engineers, customer success sort of people, commissioning, DevOps type of people to operate the virtual system. So it's predominantly that. And the category of this type of personnel can be quite expensive. We can be competing with the likes of Google and Microsoft to get the best talent. So you can imagine how costly that can be.
In the very, very beginning, you're a chemical engineer, right?
Yes.
So from a water engineer to a chemical engineer, if I recall my interview with Prakash last year, he said something to me about how
at that point I had 60, 70 people working on the software side, the AI side of the business. And increasingly, I was hiring software engineers and AI engineers and machine learning engineers. And their pay scales are nothing like my chemical engineers. And it became difficult for me to have all of that in the same company.
How much more do you have to pay those people compared to the average water people?
So I would imagine something like 50% or more, and it ranges from different regions.
It's an interesting career advice to give to people that right now, even if you want to do a purpose stuff like working in water, a sound understanding of AI and software can pay dividends.
Definitely. And we see that the shortage of skilled labor in the water industry is because it's no longer an exciting and new industry. I think it's becoming dull. So I think by utilizing this newer technology, it can give that elevation in careers, so making it more attractive for the chemical engineers or civil engineers to join this industry and play with this new shiny toy in AI.
You said that you will use that money mostly for organic growth. When I hear mostly, I hear mostly, but not only. So in the 14 million, do you have like a little bit of a pocket for dry powder in case there's really a cool company out there which you have to snap?
Yeah, being in industry, you have to be opportunistic. So you never know. I can say you never know what's the fastest way we can deliver that value to customers. Is it just acquiring a skill set, acquiring a technology, licensing or whatever to arrive at that faster speed?
So let's now describe a bit better what Turing does. To do that, I'd like to start from a bullet point I found on your website because that one was very intriguing to me. The bullet goes as following. You delivered digital solutions to Aqualia, BHP, Engie, PUB, Rio Tinto, Severn Trent, Detectronic, and Xylem. What's interesting to me beyond the enumeration of known people is that you have private utilities, public utilities, industrial players, mining giants, and the largest water tech company. So it's really somewhat all over the places. What is it that you are bringing to all those people? Is it the same thing to all of them, or is it different pieces of the puzzle to each of the category?
Each of our customers have different needs. Our products range from the hardware, IoT enable sort of hardware that you can install in sewers. So it can be submerged, that can connect then battery power, the sensors, whether the level or flow or water quality sensors. So companies like Xylem needs those solutions. Some of the water utilities need those solutions to help with the digitization and the data collection. So that's sort of the simplest level. Going on to, say, BHP and Rio Tinto, where Gradiant does the remote operations, and Smart Ops that's provided by Turing is the operating system for Gradiant to operate the plants remotely, and which keeps the cost low. And then to the level of energy to be able to optimize the plant with AI. So different level needs for different customers. And our platform being very modular, we can do that.
When you mentioned the Rio Tinto example, for instance, where Gradient is operating and you are the operating system, who's your customer? Is it Rio Tinto or is it Gradient?
We interface with both.
Okay.
So direct customer is the Gradient, but we also support, so we work with Gradient just like partners to deliver that solution.
When you do smart sewers for Xylem, don't they think that after all, you're a bit of the spin-off of their competition, so they should maybe not be that friend with you?
There was a need to use our hardware. Certain customers just use our hardware with our software, and some customers use a combination hardware with the platform to visualize the data as well.
You're based in Singapore. I have to acknowledge that one of your customers in that list is PUB. And what's always super impressive to me is when a tech company claims having bettered the operations of PUB. PUB is probably the best operated utility in the world, the best operated at probably all possible levels, and you nevertheless find ways to even improve that. So what is the full story here? How does it start?
Sure, there's two areas. One area is quite niche, particularly for Singapore, where we use IoT technology and high precision GPS on construction equipment. With Singapore, there's always construction. When you look out my apartment, there's cranes everywhere. Our hardware is mounted on these excavation equipment, and we use geofencing algorithms with a network GIS. And with the algorithm against that GIS or network map, we're able to automate the warning system when an excavation equipment is close to digging near the network pipes. It provides the warning to stop digging and prevent damage. So that's an automation that PUB needed to prevent these accidents from happening that can cost $1 million. And we've been doing that for nearly the last 3 years. Each year we prevent about up to 10 or so potential accidents from happening.
What is the precision level in terms of meters?
About 1 meters,
Wow.
up to 1 meters accuracy.
So that's your first, would you say, niche application to Singapore? What's the other one?
Yeah. The other one is about predicting membrane CIPs for new water plants. So that was a development project where PUB was thinking, can I use analytics to predict ahead, say 2 weeks, when to potentially clean the membrane? And of course, adjust that real time as well. When, for example, when you do a flush, you can help with biofouling management. So the algorithm adjusts for that. I think that's one case. And the other one for long term is how do you then prolong membrane life, and measure that. So that's probably the most challenging bit that we're still exploring. But the CIP prediction is something that has helped PUB in planning and maintaining the membranes.
You helped PUB to save over 5 million in OEM costs. Is that on the niche or the second one or the two of them combined?
It's mostly probably the niche one. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a saving of non-broken stuff because the accidents are not happening. I get a sense of all the possible things you can do. Now, if you have like a green field and you can go for your ideal customer profile, who is it?
I would imagine a industrial facility, whether it's a food and beverage, like a Pepsi or Coca-Cola, to a semiconductor, like Intel, Micron, and the likes, where we can actually monitor and analyze their water treatment and then their wastewater treatment systems to get a holistic perspective of how the two operates together. Usually you supply water, you use it, and it becomes wastewater. Then you treat it and recycle it or dispose some of it. So having an eagle eye view of the whole water cycle in a facility, I think that's where we can make the biggest impact. And of course, measure the efficiency of using water, eventually taking that across to the other water-related systems like cooling towers, any other system that uses energy, heating. If we can have a good perspective of that energy, water nexus in a facility, I think that's where we can make the biggest impact.
That's the what. Now let's move to the dollar sign. What is your business model?
So it's a basic SaaS model with a setup fee that covers the hardware and, like we discussed, the commissioning if it's on-premise. And if it's on the cloud, then it's much less for the setup fee. Once we see the value, we see value and validate the system, then we have a monthly fee.
While that makes total sense, given your type of services, wouldn't it make sense as well to propose a performance share on the total water cost saving, for instance, a performance-based reward instead of a fixed cost?
That's an interesting question. And I think that's where we started, particularly with this Synoda entity, where we estimated what sort of savings that would occur, and this is what our fees would be. What we find difficult is that to establish that, because as the parts move, and where do you go to the baseline with that variability? And it becomes very hard to pinpoint, that savings to arrive at that fee structure. So we sort of use the same principle as how much value we can deliver by savings or return on investment, and work our way backwards to what is the right return or payback period for the customer. And that's where the fee sort of sits.
You mentioned technology as a service, but you also have expertise as a service on your website, which to me sounded like a fancy way to say consultancy. Is it true?
Basically, very specific consultancy in this area, where we find also a lot of customers, for example, don't know what to do or how to do digitization. So because of our experience in design, we can audit and review the plant and provide recommendations, or we provide it as a package, extra instrumentation, modifying of the control system. So we include both the watering expertise as well as instrumentation and control to enable that quality data for taking the journey on the AI optimization and analytics.
You mentioned something interesting with the sensors, what's needed, what's data to be gathered, because that's what was one of my internal remarks when I saw that you've processed 6 trillion data points on your platforms. That's impressive. But I see two ways to look at that. The first is to say there's tremendous amounts of data out there and we don't use it, so now finally you process it. Or sometimes maybe there is no data and then you need to find a way to create the data in the first place and then only to be able to leverage it. In your experience, where would you the most often be, on which end of the balance? Plenty of data, but data-rich, information poor, or no data and you need to put the right sensors so that you start gathering data?
It's a blend of both, actually. There's plenty of wastewater treatment plants out there that is particularly on the high labor cost regions like North America, Europe, Australia, and Middle East, where it's well instrumented. The clients don't know how to use the data or make beneficial use of the data. Then you got the opposite spectrum, where in lower labor cost countries like Asia, except for Singapore, where the plants are still very manual. That's where we adapt to that as well, because we are also a advanced SCADA system. So technicians and operators can record data manually, use their phone to capture the data, and it can populate, the database with that data. Of course, it's not real time like online sensors, but it's good enough in a lot of cases to just detect anomalies and provide that value to the customers.
You mentioned how North America is one of the regions where you want to expand geographically. If I'm right, the EPA publishes every second year, a report saying what is the optimization potential for water and wastewater treatment plants in the US at least. And every year it gives numbers in the 30% range. And that is very consistent over the past 2 decades, that they mentioned that there is this 30% improvement potential inside the plants, which operators don't grab, because if you have to grease a pump, you'd rather grease the pump. and you can't at the same time focus on optimizing the operations. Where I'm heading with that is that the US has a bunch of very small systems, and those are the ones where you have that optimization potential. Is it something which you can tackle as Turing, or wouldn't those have the critical mass to afford your services and you're more catered to the big guys and the big industrials?
I think we're flexible in where we make the impact. I think it all depends on, in water treatment, there's a lot of complexities. So what type of process units are included in that plant, and whether the value of deploying AI will provide the benefit. That's the thing we need to look at first. Is it a sewage treatment plant where you can probably deliver that high level? Or is it a well-designed RO plant where the percentage is a lot smaller? So it all depends on the type of technologies, process use in those plants.
For an end user on a smaller utility to get to work with you, can they be like totally unconscious of digital and what it entails? Or do they already need a certain level of literacy so that they can then work with you to bring it to the absolute next level?
I think there's certain base knowledge that needs to be done, because then we can work through the fears of what digitalization is. Am I going to lose my job? Is it secure? So all that. I think basic knowledge needs to be in there. At this stage, I think there's still a growing sort of area of digitalization and AI.
What would be the biggest hurdle to adoption of your services today?
I think it's the perception of AI. Some customers don't know what value they want to gain out of it. So the business outcome, even though it's easy to say you can save energy, chemicals, what does that mean? How do they do it? So I think the awareness of what it can do and how much data is required to achieve it. There's also a cost of cybersecurity. Where's the data going? Is it protected? And then the other one is really, what is my return on investment? Every plant is different. No water's the same as, from my experience, and no plant's exactly the same as well. So getting arrived at that value and seeing the return on investment is a big question mark for a lot of customers here.
Given your business model and field of services, I am super happy because I can raise you those two questions, which I usually really can't with a water tech, which is how long does it take you to get the sales? And then what is your churn rate? When you acquire your customers, do they stay for life? Or is it like once it's optimized? Well, it's optimized. So thank you, Turing, but we can work without you.
I think we haven't seen any churn yet so far in the years. And that's, I guess, purely because, most of our deployment in industrial water, where there's always variability. So it's hard to just, we optimize now, and then you take it out. Variability's still there, and then the operations team needs to spend the effort to understand the variability and do the optimization. So I think that's one aspect of being sticky in the tools that we use. And just like all the Microsoft tools, like when you get used to it, you change your way of working, it's not easy to revert to a different habit or behavior. The hardest bit is to adopt first, and the change is also harder to move to something else.
So that's for the churn rate, and for your acquisition and lead time?
It's very variable. If you look at the water utilities sector, it's quite a long sales cycle with tenders, public tenders, and you have to bid. So that can range, to a year or so, typically. On the industrial side, where we work with Gradiant, that can be a lot shorter, from 1 month to 6 months.
So the 0% churn rate leads me to the next question, where you're fully allowed to tell me, no, I'm still going to ask. Can you give us an idea of your revenue today, and are you profitable?
We're at $1 million at the moment annually.
So 1 million of ARR.
Yeah. And we're looking to scale, in that 5 to 7 years to following the footsteps of Gradient, the unicorns status. That's our ambitious goal. And so with that, the funding allows us to diversify, to create the strategy to achieve that in the future. And it may not only be water that our products would impact.
You say diversification. That's great, because that's the other big question mark I had. Everything we discussed today is linked to Top Clear and is linked to everything you do in water. Your full press release is about water. So your full fundraise sounds to be about water. And yet when I go to your homepage, I have equally well placed Top Green, which is a solution for the landscaping industry.
Yeah.
How's that linked? What's the synergy and how do you end up doing stuff for landscaping?
Yeah, it was an interesting story. So that same hardware device for that PUB niche case of protecting underground assets got transferred through the COVID period to the landscaping side for the national parks in Singapore to help with monitoring the quality of the landscaping maintenance, including like grass heights, the efficiency of the labor. And from then on, we saw an opportunity in the landscaping market, particularly in the US. We're quite differentiated there, where we got both the hardware and the software platform. So that's where the synergy of the hardware comes in. The software platform also uses the same backend, that we developed for the network side. So it made it easy to develop this product for, the product market fit for the landscaping industry.
But once you're in landscaping with high accuracy GPS, advanced AI, it makes me think of a clear next adjacency, which is irrigation. Would that be a potential next extension of the story, or do you have other ideas as to where you want to diversify next?
We're studying a number of industries that uses energy and has links to water, such as like cooling towers, because the wastewater becomes, the wastewater for the treatment plant. So that was a sort of the industry. Our vision for Turing is really to revolutionize industrial automation.
You mentioned your ambition is to follow the steps of your mother company and become a unicorn. What's the horizon for that? I know it's forward-looking statements, but is it 2032, something like that, if I do the 7 years projection? If we take that North Star and we do reverse engineering, what needs to happen in the next 12 months to keep you on track with that target?
I think dominating an industrial area or the water side, and then advancing the algorithms, including the newer types like generative AI. So how do we add value to customers by using those new sort of AI technologies?
How do you define domination?
As in we're the software of choice, the AI platform for these customers, yeah.
Interestingly, in those customers, I did not find one of the big data center guys. There's no Microsoft, there's no Amazon, there's no Apple. Yet those are very good customers of Gradiant. And those are water-thirsty people, which are, I had a taste for it because I recorded some interviews which are not yet released, but they are really doing steps towards water endeavors. Why are they not a typical adjacency for you?
They'll be coming.
Okay, so there's more in the pipe.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, then that's great because that makes for, first, a good close for this deep dive, but also a good reason to speak again when you'll have more on that field to tell us about, because that's for sure an interesting development. Hip, if that's fine for you, for today, I propose you to switch to the rapid fire questions.
It's time for the rapid fire questions.
What is the toughest challenge, in your opinion, for a water tech startup?
I think getting the team in the same direction.
What would be your best single piece of advice for the founders and managers of the about 1,000 early-stage water startups?
Be humble and hungry.
What's the drop of knowledge you wish more investors knew about the water sector?
How important it is to everyday life, how much it impacts, people and the planet.
Super short. Profitability or growth?
Growth would be
I would have expected
the priority, yeah.
What's the next profile you'll hire?
An experienced domain knowledge person in water.
That answers my next question. When you hire, sector experience or startup experience?
Startup experience balanced with the sector experience.
The water startup experience.
Yes.
Opening new markets or doubling down on the current ones?
Doubling down the current one.
What's the single piece of insight your ideal customer profile needs to hear right now?
How much it can elevate their labor workforce, the AI.
What can and should I do for you?
Speak our name and how important for the future of the water industry to keep it competitive, keep it evolving.
Well, Hip, thanks a lot for having shared a bit of Turing's story today, your path, what you do, and what you aim at doing even more with that fundraise. Congratulations again for that quite impressive milestone, and I hope we'll have a next step in the story to discuss together pretty soon.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.